Hi, everybody.
Hello.
Hello, hello, hello. We'll give a second or two to get everybody connected. You guys are looking great. So good to see your faces.
It's very nice of you to say that we're looking great, Tracy.
Oh, you do. I look forward to seeing all your faces pop up. It's fun.
But Tracy, we were able to go to the library today and actually walk in. That was extremely exciting.
Wasn't it?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
I forgot how to check out a book.
Right.
Do you need an appointment?
You no longer need an appointment.
Oh,
You can walk right in. And I have to tell you, on Monday, when I opened the door and propped it open and left it open, it felt a little strange, but in a good way. It was good, but I kind of like, is this how I do it? Do I have it? Should I it's been so many months. Yeah.
I was in the library today and got to say hello to Peggy. That was fun.
Yes.
It was just great. Just popped right in, got my books. Great. Welcome back.
Well, so good to see you all, and I'm glad you all had a chance to read most or hopefully all of our book.
That's good.
What did we think of this being a graphic memoir? Was this kind of new for most of us?
Yes.
Was it different?
Totally. For sure. Yeah.
Did it take a little getting used to, or were you able to dive right in and?
I normally don't read comic books, but this one was
It's not a comic
very
book.
easy to read. I know it's not. I know it was the only way you could do this. When I think about having to do a similar thing with my mother,
Oh,
I don't know how you would write this otherwise, because you're thinking about all these different things, and so she did it quite nicely. I thought I really enjoyed it, and I even liked. She's even more deadpan than I thought she was, because that little 5-minute thing you passed out, Tracy, shows her birds and all those sorts of things. Amazing, really amazing gal. Yeah.
I watched that too, Todd, and today I also watched. Somehow it flipped me because it knows what you're watching. Big Brother knows, and I saw a interview that you could watch, and I did. It's Steve Martin interviewing Roz Chast, and it was so good. She is really very funny.
Yeah.
She's a very funny woman.
That was right. That was the one that was going to play after the 5 minutes.
Right, yeah.
I just didn't have time to watch it, actually.
It was like 45 minutes,
Yeah,
but I'm
right.
glad I watched it.
Yeah, that's like 5 years ago, but that would be fun to watch. So that's if you watch the 5-minute one. Did you see it, Marcia?
No, I saw the 5-minute, and then I also saw one. It flipped me to a different one from Politics and Prose.
Oh, yes. Yes,
I guess it's a bookstore in Washington, D.C., and she was speaking at that.
Yeah.
And it was just on this book. So it must have been after this book.
Wow. Okay.
Oh, good.
And she showed a lot of the pages from the book and sort of explained them, and that was very interesting too. You really got to see her personality that way. I thought one of the most interesting things though was one of the questions at the end. Somebody said, "So have you talked to your kids and talked about that?" And she hasn't. She hasn't. She did say maybe she threw away her drawer of jar lids, but that was not.
You think after writing a book like this, that's a good segue to your own family to be like, hey, let's talk about this.
See, my parents didn't plan for this either. When we cleaned out my mother's after my father passed away, and my mother, we had to put her in a home, and because she had Alzheimer's. I never saw so much stuff. I moved away when I was 18, but I never saw so much junk so when I was reading that part in the book, I thought to myself, oh God, yes, this reminds me of my mother. My mother had a 24-bottle coat case that had golf balls from every place she played. And I'm thinking, what do you do with this stuff?
Play golf.
So yes.
Good putter.
I think our parents.
Putter, that's right. That's a good idea.
I think our parents that grew up in the Depression saved everything. And this really came out in the book about saving anything and everything when she went through their apartment. And I thought, you know, my mom actually lived to be 106. And so when we cleaned out her house, it was amazing the things that we found, because she just didn't get rid of many things.
Mm-hmm. I have to tell you a quick story, because I also went through this with my parents recently, and my dad especially kept everything. But I also had the opportunity to help an older friend, and she passed away when she was 91. And so I helped the family clean out her house. And I kid you not, like, all of us have a drawer with a few twisty ties in it.
Yes.
She had one drawer that was all twisty ties.
Well, isn't that bizarre?
One entire drawer, just twisty ties. So yeah, you don't know what people are gonna say. Janet, you had your hand up.
Yeah, a parent story, and then I do really want to go back to the whole concept of what a different kind of book it was. It is, at least for me. So my parents didn't save everything, even though they went through the Depression. I think some of it depends on, by the time my mom and dad were moving to a retirement facility, she was so ready to get out of their house that she rented a dumpster and she just dumped.
Oh,
She just dumped stuff because she wanted to move on to something different. So it really did make a big difference. And even though she would not talk about her age, she never talked about death or dying. She lived till 92, very healthfully, actually. She did have a list of where everything was. She had my sister and me divide all her jewelry one at a time, taking turns. So it was really interesting. That part, I think that's more typical what you're all saying and what Roz Chast experienced, but it was really very different with my folks. And much less.
yeah, and I think you'll probably be in the minority with most people, I would think. Yeah.
I hope I'll remember that with my own children.
Mm-hmm. That's the thing. A lot of us that have lived through it with our parents, we think we're going to do better for our kids, but will we? I don't know. There is another book, if anyone's heard of this.
Lucky.
Oh, Chandra, was that you trying to say something?
I don't think so.
I think she's trying to freeze up. But I was going to mention there's a book titled The Swedish Art of Death Cleaning. Has anyone heard of that?
Oh, I've heard of it.
Yep.
And it's the Swedish practice. I haven't read it yet. I have it, but just of, kind of cleaning out and not leaving everything for your family to deal with. So it's kind of an interesting idea.
I have a friend who, after cleaning out after both her brothers that passed away the same summer, said she came home and cleaned out her underwear drawer. She said that was going through her brother's underwear and seeing ratty underwear.
Oh, that's funny.
I have a question.
Mhm.
So one of my reactions to this book is that it's a testament to the value of book clubs, because I never would have selected a book like this. I've never read a graphic novel. I've seen Roz Chast's cartoons in the New Yorker for decades. Sometimes I think they're clever. I started it, and as soon as I got into it, not only was it in cartoon format, or graphic format rather, but she's talking about how neurotic her parents were and how neurotic she is. And I thought, oh my gosh, a neurotic Jewish family, and it's in cartoon format. I mean, I would not have kept going, but I felt like I should, and really wound up liking the book a lot. What? I wondered how other people reacted from like their initial impression into how they felt as they went on.
One of my favorite formats is graphic novels. I love graphic novels and have read several. I'm not addicted to them, but I have read several. And this is one of the best ones I have ever read. This woman is brutally honest about herself and about the people she's writing about. What a journey she had, what a learning experience. And she brings the reader or the viewer, there's a lot of text in this. So it really isn't, there could have been a lot less text, but she did such a marvelous job. And in many ways, you realize what the graphic novel form brings to the reader that prose takes more time to do. And that's really part of what a graphic novel does. It's a different experience for the reader. And I thought it was just an outstanding. I could see why it won. What a major award did it win? Was it the National Award for Autobiography?
I know it was one of the New York Times top 10 of 2014, and it did win some awards. I don't remember.
Right. It's just outstanding.
The
Yeah.
National Book Critics Circle Award winner, and then the National Book Award finalist.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
You know, so it's
Yeah.
just outstanding.
I think this was probably a good one to start with because it does have a fair amount of text. And from the little interviews we watched, some of you, she, I think it's pointed out that she has more text, even in her cartoons for the New Yorker, they tend to have more text than many others might. But what I found, and this was my second, I guess, graphic novel to read. The first one I read, my daughter-in-law kind of specializes in, she's written her dissertation on using graphic novels in classrooms, and she's written another book with a fellow about graphic novels. Again, focused toward how to use them with children of all ages in school. So what I found was that how much the pictures, the drawings start to tell you, as Tracy said, without having to read the word. You can really, I felt I was really learning a lot just by looking at the pictures and the expressions, even though they're cartoonish expressions, you get a lot out of that, emotion and feeling. So that was kind of interesting.
So it would appear to me that there's a reason we say a picture is worth 1,000 words.
1,000 words.
There you go.
Right. Very good, Karen. Yeah.
Although interesting too, though, there is, for graphic format, there is a lot of text, but it's handwritten too.
I feel the same way too.
Uh-oh. Chandra, I don't think we can hear you very well.
At all.
But it's just kind of interesting that could have all been typed, as much text as there is, that could have all been typed, but yet she chose to, that's another graphic element, that the fact that it's all handwritten.
My wife, I'm the only wife tonight too. Delaware County.
That was Chandra again.
Yeah. Can you hear us, Chandra?
Else?
Muted.
Not coming through well.
Back. Can you hear me now?
A little bit.
A little
Try,
bit
go ahead
better.
and try. Yeah, you're pretty glitchy, so it gets hard to hear. Was anyone else not sure of this book, but ended up sticking with it and doing all right with it?
I was going to say, my name is Janet, too. This is my first graphic novel, and I just was not sure.
Well, got part of that, but not all of it. Now you're kind of froze.
I think she was saying this was her first graphic
First
novel,
graphic
and she would
novel.
not have
Mhm,
either liked it or
Probably read it.
recommend it.
Probably read it on her own, maybe, without book club.
The other aspect that I really appreciated was that it went from very specifically only child Roz and her overbearing mother and her, I think of him as a milquetoast father. I mean, he just went along to get along, to a real universality. It was really in me, the reader at least, going from her very specific situation to that which most of us, if not all of us, have experienced, which is how do you deal with this? No matter how large your family, no matter what your ethnic background, you know, it's just, I really liked it. I've recommended it to people. I mean, that is not where
Yeah.
it started. Yeah.
I wish I had read it years ago. My middle sister was the only one back in Ohio with my mother when my mother was going through these sorts of things. And I don't think you can really comprehend unless you're there, the stress and the work and the emotion and the conflict and, you know, all these things that came up in the book. I would have been, I think, a lot more understanding, and not that I was, you know, not being nice, but I tended to be here in Wisconsin saying, well, Chris, maybe you should this, or why didn't you that, or couldn't you do, and without really understanding. So this is I think a great book for people to read, to really get a picture of what it's like. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, something a lot of us relate to, whatever part we're at with our family. But what do you think of the way she portrayed her parents in this?
I bet they'd say it was pretty accurate.
I would agree, Jane. I would agree.
It was pretty honest.
I mean, it's an easy way to depict your parents, how you feel about them, especially at certain times of their life. That worked out very well. Okay.
And we've got a couple people with mic problems too. Linda is here, but can't talk or be on video. And she says the part about cleaning out the house really hit home. I had to shred utilities bills back to 1945. They used to include social security number. Yeah.
I really was taken or surprised by, as I said earlier, how brutally honest she was, not only about herself and feelings and how she really didn't want to be doing this and she didn't even want to be with her parents until, you know, things started to much later. But she portrayed them, I thought, again, with an honesty that I found. I kept thinking, I'm not sure I could ever be that honest in public. You know, it's, I don't know if it was able to relieve or if it was something almost like a catharsis. I mean, I realize it's how she communicates. It's what she does for a living. So she's going to do that instead of something else. But I really was astonished by her level of honesty, because it was quite brutal for both of them. And she comes around, as I think it was Janet that said, you know, the story arcs differently. And toward the end, she's much more accepting of where her parents are in their lives. But I just kept thinking I could just not be that honest out loud. You know, think it, actually put it down and own it.
And make it public.
Yeah, and own it. I mean, she never really backed away, except in her own gradual or final acceptance of how this was going to be. But I just don't think I could have ever been that honest. And I've been within my parents and so forth and went through the whole thing. And, you know, it makes me think, whoa, yeah.
Well, she started way back when she was a child. So she really had this whole attitude and this whole thing going her whole life. So she was living it and she just portrayed it from day one. And it never changed, really. I didn't think she got a little softer at the end. She understood, but she did not have a happy childhood. And it just reflected in this whole story. I thought it was very honest, but I liked her sense of humor. She did have a sense of humor. I thought was just really great.
Yeah. I think it was another one of these authors that does a service in terms of helping people know, you know what, you're not the only one. This happens to a lot of people. A lot of people feel this way, have gone through these things, these emotions with their parents. It's not so bad, you know. I understand why you feel the way you feel. It's a I accept how you feel, accept how I feel kind of thing.
I like the photographs that were included. And this was my first graphic
Mhm,
novel,
mhm.
so I don't know if that's something typical or atypical.
I don't think it is
But
typical.
it kind of also gave it a feeling of an album, a scrapbook that she was putting together.
Mhm.
There were some pictures and then
Mhm.
her notes and her drawings. So it was very touching.
I wondered if
It
she
was.
had had a sibling, like Chandra said, if she would have had a sibling, I think her life would have been totally different. And it just shows you the sibling thing in a family, or the number of children in a family, what an effect that has on each child in that family.
Yes.
She was really all by herself.
You know, I think that's solidified by the fact that she didn't go back for what, 15 years afterwards. And then all of a sudden she's thrown into the mix and has to be pretty much the primary caregiver for these two very aged and difficult people, from what it looked like to me.
And that brought up a question for me. When she said she hadn't been there for all those years, did that mean that she hadn't seen them at all, or that they came to visit her?
They came to visit her, is what she talked about in
All right.
the one I watched today. She said she just took it as her life was busy. She had kids. She had to get her kids somewhere. She was busy. She didn't drive. That if her parents, so it was for her, it was easier if her parents came to see her.
I see. And
she said even when they got older and she wasn't seeing him all the time, they talked a lot on the phone.
I think they did have a sibling, which did affect, I think, the way
that's true.
she grew up. The daughter who died, her mother's first child, was born premature and died, I think, within a day or so. But it sounded to me from the book that had a pretty good effect, pretty great effect on her mother, perhaps, and affected how she then responded and related to Roz. So it was that ghost sibling that was kind of, you know, part of her life. I felt like, but that could be wrong. I don't know.
Something along those same lines, Jane, there were several points in there that were just so poignant. And one was the message, these aren't her exact words, but she was really the odd person out. Her parents were an entity. You know, they were a couple, and they had a dance, if I can use that phrase.
Right.
You know, her mother did and said this, and her father did and said that in response. And her father lived for her mother everything that her mother did, and she was really an outsider looking in. And I've not ever known anyone where that was true, where the child wasn't an integral, you know, part of the family relationship and was just an outsider. So that would have been incredibly
difficult,
hurtful. No wonder she wanted to get out of Dodge when she was 16. You know, she was just kind of a hanger on. And so that to me was stunning, frankly, because it's such a different mother or daughter parent relationship from anything I've known personally, certainly. What did other people think about that?
Well, I was able to relate to it because I was sort of on the outside of my parents' relationship as well, not as severely as Roz seems to be. But my sister was much older, so I was younger by myself. But I think but I'm not sure it was so much that I think they didn't know what to do with me. I've often thought I was a changeling, but I think also that because I'm very different from all the rest of them. And but I think it was partly the way they grew up themselves. They grew up, you know, my father was the oldest of 5 boys who were only 6 years in 5 boys in 6 years. Dad died early. They worked super hard from very young. And that's really what he did, was work. My mother was one of, I don't know, 14 kids.
Wow.
And they were like 3 kids every several years. And it was, I think they led hard lives. And I don't think that incorporating children, I don't think they were incorporated into their parents' lives in the same way. It was hard work. It was directive. What, you know, parents said was they told you what to do. You weren't part of it. You were out playing or out working. farming, the weeding. I just think there was enough of that left over. My folks were born in the first decade of the 1900s or so. I think it just sort of, I don't think they were sort of the parents that we think of as parents these days. Well, not even these days, but in the 50s and the 60s. It was just, so I was quite separate from them. So that did not surprise me at all, especially as a sort of a solitary child and observing. And you spend a lot of time observing and figuring out where you are and how to stay out of the way.
That's a good way to put it. Yes.
Mean like hers, mean or
Right.
right. Quite so cranky. They were just
Removed.
removed. Just different parallel tracks, two tracks of life. And so, but again, I thought she explained it really well. And again, through her illustrations, her panels.
Well, even her relationship with her mother and her relationship with her father were both very different from each other.
Yes.
And how does she portray that, or how does you see that affecting how she relates to their kind of end of life care?
She does say at the end that she's still working on her relationship with her mother.
With her mother.
She's come to terms with her dad, but she's still working on her mother. Because that mother
It's not here.
You have.
Speaking of children.
I know.
I'm not here. You didn't see that.
Mine's hiding in the foreground. You guys just can't see him.
Well, she talks about how her folks grew up, just a couple blocks from each other. They never dated anybody else other than, what does she say? Something about, other than a couple hospital stays, the war, and going to the bathroom, they never apart. It was a different.
What surprised me is they were well traveled, weren't they? Didn't she describe that? And that surprised me when I thought about the limited place they lived and everything, that they really did have a bigger world. That was unusual in my mind.
Definitely seemed to narrow as they aged, and they didn't do much or go anywhere.
We kind of know what that's like.
Yeah.
Tracy, that's going to happen to all of us at some point.
Yeah.
Give up.
She says her father never learned to drive.
Right.
He never
It's
drove.
weird, isn't it? That sounds weird.
My mother never learned to drive.
I was going to say, not in New York City. One of my kids lives in New York City, and he has no interest in driving. He'll ride his bike anywhere, but he won't drive. So,
Right.
very normal.
My dad was like, I forget, Jane said, my dad was born in 1908 and grew up in New York City in the tenements. And when he married my mother and they moved finally to Ohio, he was 42. He didn't know how to drive. She had to teach him how to drive. And he was never a great driver. Cussed at everybody on the road. But and that's one of the things I also, Jane, I think we don't know her parents' background all that well, but I have learned that you don't know people's backgrounds many times, even your parents sometimes, until they're gone and you're older or shortly before they're gone. And it explains a lot sometimes about how they are, and that all parents do the very best they know how. They just may not know how the way we want them to know. But she says at the end that I think she used the word special. They were special people, and she knew that they loved her and she loved them. So I thought that was just really nice. Yeah.
What was Chandra's question? Chandra just typed a question.
Oh.
Can you imagine living in an apartment your whole marriage and most of your life in New York versus how we live in Door County?
No.
But that's what they knew.
Yeah.
Very, very different life than what most of us have.
I would really miss trees. I can't imagine just having the 20 trees in Central Park sharing with everyone else.
Right, yeah. For me, anytime I've lived anywhere else, I miss the water. I need to be close to the water because I grew up on the water. I need to have it. I need to know it's right there. I need to know it's close.
I get that.
I can feel it even if I can't see it. But yeah, I've often thought about people that live in these big, huge apartment buildings and how different that has to be. But then they can't imagine how we live on our own without people around them.
Right.
Tracy, Linda had a question that was just on here. You want to read that one to us if you've got it?
She says this is a lot like an oral history that people do now with their elders, but she did it in the graphic novel format.
Oh, yeah.
Very true.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, how would this have been different for you had it not been graphic format? If it was just straight prose?
Maybe not as interesting.
It would have. I would have struggled with it. You know,
Yeah.
you'd read a paragraph. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. I don't, it would have been depressing and it just, I don't know. I don't think we would have seen the, her humor as much,
Right.
Without
True.
the drawings that she had. So, yeah, it definitely needed to be a graphic novel, I think.
I mean, the illustrations of the refrigerator and some of those things just made me laugh. And as pathetic as it was when you're cleaning out all this stuff, it was pretty, it was just easier to deal with than to go back and think about how it was to clean out my mother's house and all that sort of thing. So, yeah.
Well, I mentioned earlier that I haven't read graphic novels to speak of, but I also don't really read memoirs. I'm not that riveted by other people's lives in their own words, at least not yet. Maybe I will become more riveted by that. I guess it depends how old the person is when they write a memoir. You know, when a 28-year-old rock star is writing his memoir, I'm like, really? And maybe this is because I just think I don't have anything to say personally. So I'm wondering what everybody has to talk about in their lives. But so it's a combination of also not typically reading a memoir. And so I can't say whether I think it was more riveting because it was in graphic form, because it drew apparently most of us in, as opposed to just her writing it all out in prose. I agree with, I don't know your first name, is it Todd? Saying that, yeah, it was just much more interesting because of the looks on their faces as much as anything. I mean, she captured just what this look of horror that she'd have on her face,
Right.
Or a grimace that she'd have on her face was really, it was captivating.
Right. Yeah. Because I remember the pencil drawer where they have all these pencils. I must have laughed for 15 minutes when I saw them. It was amazing. Drawer. You open up a drawer and there's all this crap in there that you have to deal with.
Yep.
Oh.
I wanted to know what closet in New York City is that large. That's what I wanted to know.
Yes.
Where is a closet that large in an apartment in New York City?
They have the one last apartment that had that. That's why they lived there for so many years.
Right.
Good one.
They've been there so
That's
long.
funny.
It's probably an old apartment building.
Right. Yeah.
Those don't exist anymore.
Now, my son's apartment in Brooklyn would probably be the size of that closet. So that's how you can think about it.
So what did you think of how she portrayed herself? Sometimes I found even the drawings of herself didn't seem all that flattering. What did you think of how she drew herself, portrayed herself? Any thoughts?
Well, if her parents, or particularly her mother, made her feel, or didn't make her feel like an insider, made her feel like an outsider and not worthy, and she took that on as a child, and that stays with you. And so her drawings probably reflect her sense of not having a lot of self-worth or self-confidence, or although she's very confident in these interviews, I feel she's kind of cute, actually. It's very funny. But she has a picture of herself, and that might be it, of not being a very attractive, or she didn't feel like her mother was attracted to her. Yeah.
She was brutally honest.
I think drawing yourself is very hard. I think that's one of the
That is
hardest
true.
assignments you can give yourself as an artist.
Mm-hmm.
And
That's true. We definitely see ourselves different, don't we?
Different, yeah.
well, Linda just pointed out in her question that in all of the photos that are in here, she's like a very sad child.
Very.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
no even glimmer, hint of a smile. Just,
Yeah.
yeah.
I think she was treated as an adult her whole life.
That's a great
That
point.
could be, that could be.
And adulthood is hard.
It is, even for adults. Sheesh.
In the interview I watched, she put up a cartoon. She had been asked by some publication or something to send in a picture of her when she was 9. And she asked if she could do it in cartoon form, and they said yes. And so she's sitting on her bed and she's surrounded by books and she's reading, and every book is about bad things, you know, leprosy and all sorts of things. And she talks about how in her family it was always, well, you know, if you don't wear a swim cap, you'll get an ear infection and then you'll die.
Right.
Get a headache and then you'll die. Lockjaw. Where did Lockjaw go? When I was growing up?
Yeah, the model of doom. Jane's showing the model of doom. I love that page.
The wheel of doom. Yeah.
No, so that was her feelings was that was the way she just thought, even as a child.
Yeah, it was all doom and gloom. Huh?
That part reminds me a lot of Woody Allen. I mean, let's take the current Woody Allen mess out of it. Just Woody Allen, and before we knew what we know now, I mean, everything was always about death. I mean, in Annie Hall, he was talking about death, and I don't know how much. I honestly don't know how much of that is ethnic. That, you know, it's a different background, or how much of it is just that your parents are always talking about it. Or her 2 grandmothers. How about her grandma?
Oh my gosh! Yeah.
Oh
Lord.
I thought one had some mental illness. The father's mother.
Oh my gosh.
I forget what the 2 things were. One was that she used to sleep on the father's bed.
At the foot of his bed.
And then there
She
was some
slept
other
at the
foot of his bed.
At the foot of his bed, yeah. Till he got married.
Yeah, and then there was one other thing, and I've forgotten what that was.
I can't remember.
I thought, oh, that sounds like a little bit of mental illness there.
So we've talked about her brutal honesty and also her sense of humor that comes through in here. Was any of it ever too much for anyone or seemed inappropriate?
No.
I don't think it seemed inappropriate. There were a few times that I closed the book because it was too close, too true.
Yeah.
And there were a couple times it was about me, and I thought, oh my God. And so I had to kind of close the book and go away for a little while. And but
You're
that's
saying
one of the
maybe
good
we
things.
should buy the book and put sticky notes in it for our kids?
Yes, really. I had to close the book, but that's the reason for reading it is, you know, I have a drawer full of pencils and pens that I haven't used in years.
But Jane, do you have a vintage? Blender? You have
A vintage blender?
Oh.
Yeah, that you got.
I have a vintage crock pot.
That by opening a new bank account.
No,
Right,
but,
right.
but
That
I
was
have
pretty
several.
funny, yeah.
I have several olive green appliances.
Yeah.
Yes,
Avocado.
You never know how much.
avocado. Yes.
You never know what doesn't sell at an estate sale when you have things that are that old.
Yeah.
Well, has anyone else spent time during the pandemic getting rid of stuff?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Oh yeah. Bags and bags.
We got rid of a lot of stuff last spring because we didn't have anything else to do.
Yeah.
So
I wish I could say that, but
yes, but you were probably still working and still more active. You have younger children.
and children doing virtual learning, so that takes up more time than you would ever hope. it
Tracy
does.
isn't even close to having the stuff we have.
Exactly. But for those of us who are at a different phase of life, who are looking, actually, I have adult children who are saying, Please take care of,
Stuff.
please
Yeah,
get rid of a lot
really.
of stuff. Please don't leave this for
Right.
me to do. So we're listening.
One of my favorite comics is a picture of a father and a son, and they're standing in front of this garage, and the door is open, and it's just completely full of stuff. Jane knows. And the father says, "Someday this will all be yours."
Well, you know what my cousin said, they basically say, I don't want any of this stuff. Just get rid of it. We've
Yep.
tried many times. I tried to even give them a car and they didn't even want a car.
Oh, goodness.
Yeah.
When we,
And that's a big shift from our generation.
Oh, yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
The kids don't want that stuff.
No, and none of my kids, actually only one of my kids drives. If you can believe it. And, you know,
when we moved here and we built our house, it's a small house. And we downsized from a house we'd been in for 35 years. And then we downsized my dad's house, who'd been in his house and brought everything with him. And he was almost 100. So we downsized to, we essentially live over the garage, and we built without closets.
Yeah.
We don't have closets. And I can tell you that really helps.
Oh,
We have drawers. We have drawers. We have a few drawers for the underwear. I think we like underwear. We have a few drawers. If the clothing doesn't fold up, it doesn't come in the house. And we have some closet. We have some shelving downstairs, but we don't have kitchen cabinets. We have just a few drawers. Really,
Wow.
it helps. And so when we moved here, we downsized 2 houses. And so we've done our Swedish death cleaning.
That's interesting though,
great.
because as young families, you try to buy houses with large closets. But
Yeah.
you're saying closets is the key.
right.
Yeah.
Or a basement where you can store everything.
You know, we have just 2 small bedrooms. So one bedroom could be a closet, and then you'd have a 1-bedroom house.
Mhm.
But
Well, think about the
it's
huge.
It really suited us. Everything I got rid of, I would call and ask my son, "Do you want this?" He'd say, "Nope." Nope.
Yeah,
Nope.
they don't
So the
want it.
wedding dress went off to the secondhand store. Family 200-year-old furniture went off to the secondhand store. Off it went.
Wow,
Mhm.
wow,
Yeah, and
very impressive.
we haven't missed it.
Yeah. I mean, when we moved up here, the same thing happened. I mean, we got rid of probably how many rooms here? About 3 or 4 rooms.
Well, we had 5 bedrooms and they all had a bed or something in it, and, living room, family room. Oh, yeah. We just, gave away. And now the rule is supposed to be, if something comes in the house, something has to
goes
go out.
That's a
We're
hard
not
one.
always good about that, but the rule that we were trying to follow.
In our garage.
Linda's comment.
No, so we moved from a really large house. And when the kids all live in other states, it's ridiculous to have a big house. So we just got rid of all this stuff and downsized quite a bit, I think. So
I think it helps if you move every once in a while. It certainly helps.
Yeah.
Linda has a comment here too. She's always amazed at my neighbors with 2-car garages who park outside all winter because the garage is crammed with stuff. I can kind of relate to that one.
Yeah.
So true confession, we kind of went the other direction, because when we built in the Oaks, we had to get a little bit more stuff, which is not the right direction. So, but not that much.
okay.
Yeah, when we bought our house up here, we bought bigger than we needed, but we thought our family would be bigger, and we end up with just one son. And somehow you still fill every space you have.
Yeah.
Nature abhors a vacuum.
That's right.
Yeah. So has anyone had these big, meaningful end-of-life discussions with their families? Does anyone feel like they're more prepared than this family was?
My father was so good at this. Mom had died 20 years before he passed away, but he had a list for me, and once a year he'd go through the list with me and tell me where everything was. He had everything laid out. There was a number to call of the funeral home, and they had everything.
Wow.
He made it extremely easy.
Good.
I'm envious. I have the opposite.
I wonder what his list was.
You know, like where all of his accounts were.
All his bank books.
Yeah.
Oh gosh, that was funny, wasn't it?
My mom had everything organized. My father had dementia in his last 10 years of life. And it never really became horrible. But my mother was always the person in charge and the organizer. And so she had everything was laid out, absolutely everything. And so it really was, the loss was horrible because we were so close, but the aftermath was really quite simple. And so and same thing with my husband, with my mother-in-law. So it was a lesson learned to really do that, give that gift to children, you know, so.
Karen, what were you going to say? Karen, what were you going to say?
I was going to say, I have a father who's 96 and my mother just died very recently. And he has literally walked out of the last 4 houses he's lived in and left us to take care of every single thing in it. And to go through that, put stuff in the next place that he goes to. And it's getting old. It's getting real old. So, you know, you talk about her being brutally honest. I sometimes just want to be brutal. It's very, very difficult to have to live with. It really is.
Yeah.
And he also, at one point, he had what we called the death book. And it was where everything was organized. Like you're talking about all of this. This is here,
Death book.
here. Well, he totally forgot that there was such a thing as the death book. We don't even have it anymore. So he went through all of that, and now we don't know what it is or where it is. So it gets tough. But one of the other things that I was thinking about in regard to older age here is that you also see yourself falling into that category. It's hard to see your parents, but to realize there, but for the grace of God, go I. My time is coming. I will be there. And that's what makes it hard too, knowing you will be there, I think.
Yeah, I think that's important to think about. I know with my parents, we didn't have any of the big talks till it was kind of too late to start having them.
Sure.
And really, anything can happen to any of us at any time.
Anytime.
So there's no perfect time, but it's good to get prepared. I just ordered a book for the library called "What If I Get Hit by a Bus?" Like, it tells you kind of what to get in order, just in case.
Yeah.
So what do you think of the portrayals of assisted living in her book? And do you think that'll change? What do you think it's going to look like in future generations?
I think they're pretty realistic. I had my mother's sister, and we would visit her in Ohio and had one of those dining table issues where when she was new there, didn't realize that there were rules about, you know, who sat where. And so that was, you know, an upsetting thing for her, sad story. And the things on the door, that's very typical. And yeah, will it be different? I don't know. Gosh, none of us think we're gonna have to live in a place like that. We kind of, I think, are in denial.
I think we're in denial, Jane.
I'm in denial.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So my mother's place was actually pretty nice. It was. My family lived in California, and so we found a place not close to where they lived, but up close to where my brother had lived. Unfortunately, my brother passed away about 6 months after my mother went up there, something like that. But
yeah, something like that.
Yeah, and we could actually go see her. When we came out from here, we would go see her, and you know, they had lots of activities, and my mother claimed that everybody was cheating at bingo except herself, and you know, and so, but I think she got along pretty well, and I honestly believe that the people that were there took care of her in terms of her medical needs and so on. So it was worth every penny. Whatever, I don't remember what we paid, but it was worth every penny. So, and I hope it's like that for me. Otherwise, I think we tell people we're going to stay in this house until we die and not move anyplace else. But
I know that's what we think.
her discussion of sundowning, I think that's called sundowning when they start to and that happened with my dad, and she had it perfectly described. It was almost unbelievable because he'd be fine during the day. He was in assisted living. But just then toward the end of the day, these odd things would come up, and he was convinced people anyway, and I didn't realize they called it sundowning, but again, there was so much to learn from this book from her. There just was, I mean, it's a fairly straightforward memoir. It's fairly simple in its outline. It's just a timeline and chronological and move through it and sort of ordinary lives in some way. But my goodness, what it exposed us to many things and brought out feelings that we might think maybe perhaps they're legitimate, even if they're brutal or unkind or whatever.
Exactly.
It helps you sort of sort those things out, and sundowning was interesting.
So I have to ask a question of people whose parents were in assisted living. Did they want to go? Did they?
No.
My mother was not willing. She didn't want to go.
No.
Not at all. Right. Okay.
No,
That's
my
the impression.
I had to force, well, I gave my father very little choice because I was the only one there to help him, and I was still working, and he couldn't be left alone. But after this is so my dad, after he was there for quite a while, I said, what do you think? And he said, you know what? This is great. He said, the grub's on time and it's good.
Worth it.
That's the important thing.
Right. Yeah, I mean, they have, but it's interesting because we didn't know that since I live back here, I didn't know that how my mother was doing, because we had in-home care for a while. And I remember when we went out, and Sharon and I went out, the neighbors that lived next to her came over and told me, your mother's not doing well here. You need to do something about this. So that's when we decided that we should do something. And my sister lived in California and close by, but she didn't really recognize any of this either. So it was kind of interesting. And then when we told my mother that we're going to do this, well, that was not a pleasant day. To say the least.
Yeah, she would call the people that were with her 24 hours a day her babysitters. She did not like her babysitters.
Right.
No.
But she didn't want to go live anyplace else either. I don't really know what she wanted exactly. She wanted a life the way it used to be, and of course it couldn't be that way. So what are the choices for the kids to make up? So yeah, the assisted living place was pretty nice, and she never really complained about it there. She didn't call them babysitters there.
No.
I don't think she called them wardens either exactly, but
she was treated really well, and never complained too much. More about the cheating at bingo. That's all I remember. And I just were quiet. But anyway. So if I learned anything, I'm not going to cheat at bingo.
Was there anything in this book you felt she should have touched on that she didn't?
I don't think so.
Well, I'm not sure she touched on a whole lot about how she was dealing with the parents and how that affected her family. She didn't talk about a lot about her husband or her kid and how that would impact the family. I mean, what she was doing, it takes a huge amount of time. It's that sandwich generation where you've got to take care of your older, and then you got to take care of the younger. And she never really mentioned how she was handling that.
That's true.
Yeah, and I got the impression her children were probably still relatively young.
I think so.
Still at home. Yeah. That's a good question.
Yeah, Chandra chimes in and says her family and friends were missing from the story. That's true. We don't hear anything about friends either.
Yeah.
So it feels kind of like a deliberate omission.
That her husband and children did not want to be part of it. They may have requested, who knows, let's say her husband was resentful. I mean, maybe he just didn't want that to be part of the story.
That might be that because she's a cartoonist, they may have sorted through that a long time ago.
Right.
We're not part of it. Yeah.
Maybe, she was so honest with every other part, she kept that private.
Yeah. I'm wondering if this book was really very, very much for herself and her parents. as a
Mhm,
unit.
mhm.
It was just that kind of close-knit thing that she needed to do, just the three of them. There was some sort of therapy in a sense for her, perhaps.
But
Right,
think of
right.
even that 5-minute video today, which I watched just now as well. She showed us her birds. She showed us her can collection. She showed us her file cabinets. We didn't see pictures of her husband. We didn't see pictures of her kids. You know, it's
About her.
all the other
I
stuff.
think they're out of the house now. Yeah.
That's true, though. That's true. Yeah.
Now, was that on a email from Tracy that you got that information?
Yeah, I did
Right.
email that out.
I'll have to go back and look for that.
Yeah, it's just a 5-minute video of her at home, but I think it gives a good little glimpse into her life. Not her family, obviously, as you said, but yeah. And her other artwork, which is kind of interesting to see.
I enjoyed seeing her in person. Well, I mean, you know, in the video, to look at her illustrations, her cartoons of herself. I thought they were remarkably similar. You know, self-portrait, you can just see it, that the glasses and the facial features, her haircut that comes right to here, whether she's young or now her hair is gray and it's right here and still the same. I enjoyed that part. I also enjoyed, she's doing hooked rugs. She spends a lot of time hooking rugs, and they're of her, she's doing one of her father eating breakfast.
Yeah.
And one of her mother, which you know, that's a dedication. That is, what is that? Coming to terms? Is that, you know, working?
You know, I think it sounds like a quirk, actually.
They're very detailed too.
Yeah.
The rugs.
Well, the other quirky thing was it says, like, I like having my parents in my closet. It's not messy. I think it makes a nice home for them. Whenever I open the door, I see the boxes and I think of them. Okay, well, now that's a little quirky too.
Well, it says mom and dad in the closet.
Yeah, exactly.
But as she says, who wants them on the mantle? You know,
Right.
It says put them on the mantle. How much better? You open the closet
Why not?
in the morning and say, "Oh, hi, mom. Hi, dad." You know, ashes are odd things.
They are. If I put mine on the mantle, the cats would just knock it off, and that'd be disaster. So do you think she had, or is there an overall message, or is this more of just her personal story that she had to get out, and this was the best way for her to do it?
I'd say a little more the latter, but I think it's got a lot of messages for people who read it.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. It's her story, and I felt that she had to get it out, that it was therapeutic for her, but it resonates with a lot of people, particularly of our generation.
Yeah.
I think that one of the messages I got from it was when she asked her mother if she wanted her to stay, and I think her mother just didn't answer her. And she
said it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. Thank you.
Yeah.
And then she went in the car and cried.
Yeah.
And then somewhere she said that this was not, you can't write a relationship in that time of their life. Something like that. In other words, it was too late for those two to mend their relationship. And I could relate to that.
Yeah. What was the other thing similar to that where her mother told her a story about spanking her in the store? Remember that when Roz was a little girl and wandered off, and her mother found her, was so upset, and she was trying to apologize for doing that. And then a little later, Roz says, there was a question she asked her mother, and her mother said, oh, about being close. And her mother said, does it bother you? And I forget what Roz said, but Roz asked her mother, does it bother you? And the mother said, no.
Yeah.
So her mother was just always, like you all have said, brutally honest with Roz too. So Roz was brutally honest in the book about her parents.
Yeah. I thought it was interesting, kind of in the very beginning, the mother says, I don't want to be a pulsating piece of protoplasm.
Mhm.
And yet that's kind of what she ended up being at the end. That was so sad. I thought that's not what she wanted to be, and that's kind of what she ended up being. And I thought that was kind of sad.
She seemed to have a really tenacious hold on life.
Yeah, it took her a
She
long
did.
time to die.
It took her a long time to die.
Mhm.
A long time.
Right. I think it said the devil doesn't want her and God's not ready. That was one of the quotes. The devil doesn't want her and God's not ready.
Well, I don't know about anybody else, but almost on every page, I expressed thanks for my mother. I mean, all I could think of page in and page out was what a different life a person has with a loving mother.
Mhm.
Yes, yes.
It just absolutely night and day. And that was probably the most poignant aspect of it. The whole book to me was, I can't even imagine what it must like to have a mother who doesn't really love you. And I don't think her
Makes
mother
you
really-
resilient sometimes.
Yeah.
I'm sure it does. I mean, I guess if you're a survivor, it makes you resilient. If not, it makes you a neurotic person
Right.
who can't
Right.
love in return. You know, it's so. I am not a psychiatrist. I'm not going any farther with this.
So some of you have said you read it and have recommended it to other people. What do most people say they would recommend it, or who do you think would be the best kind of audience for this?
I would.
But anybody that doesn't know about a graphic novel, I think this would be an excellent way to get into it. I don't know if Todd told you, we read a graphic novel about Martin Luther. Well, I mean, you know, it was okay, but this was a much preferred graphic novel.
Right.
In my
Sounds like an
estimation.
oxymoron.
I know.
We didn't laugh nearly as hard, and it wasn't. I kind of forgot about a lot of stuff.
Yeah. So this one kind of grabbed us a lot more than the Martin Luther graphic novel did. So
And I think sometimes we should have our kids read it.
Novel about Martin Luther, a graphic novel. What made you do that?
well, it was the Reformation. I forget what 500th year of the
It was the 500th
Reformation. And we're Lutherans.
Karen still has the same question.
And so our Bible study was doing it. That's what we did for our Bible study. We did a graphic novel on Martin Luther.
Okay.
Yeah.
And we learned a
Yeah.
lot.
And you know what? That's better than the 50,000 books that are written on Martin Luther, because it's a lot shorter.
Yeah.
But-
So that was the better choice.
But this was very good. So this was a very good choice because
gosh.
Well,
it made you think. Even though I laughed a lot, it made me think about, okay,
Oh, yeah.
I need to do something. I need to have our kids read this, don't we? Although who knows what's going to happen? No, but anyway.
You know, I'm glad to have read it, and I haven't ever done a graphic novel. I am not going to race out and look for more graphic novels to read. I mean, you know, it's nice. I'm glad I did it, and on to something else. Kind of is how I look at it. But when I see my little kids reading graphic novels, I feel differently about it. I feel like they're not challenging themselves enough because I look at those more in terms of cartoons than I do graphic novels. Like.
Well, then Jane's
What is
daughter-in-law
the
should
difference
talk to you.
between? So what is the difference between a comic book and a graphic novel other than length? I mean, what constitutes a graphic novel as opposed to a comic book, or is that a
Good
discussion for
question.
another hour later?
Might be. I'm sure there probably is some definition or are definitions out there, but perhaps it's, I don't know.
We'll Google when we get off the.
Right?
Yeah, okay.
Good
point.
Part of
But
that
Jane,
is
your daughter-in-law.
the serial nature of comics is slightly different from the novel nature of this one, for instance. This isn't going to be, you know, waiting for issue number 2. Not that there aren't follow-up novels, but a part of it is the way they're used. The audiences can be different, but you know, it just is. And many graphic novels have no text at all, especially some of the very early ones. So there's no single definition, and there's a big, you know, discussion in the library world about even categorizing these as graphic novels. They really should simply be put in the novel section under the author's name. Or if they're nonfiction, like I was going to suggest, if you really enjoyed Martin Luther in cartoon form, you might want to read Darwin's Origin of the Species.
Oh, yes.
There you go.
Graphic novel.
Yes.
But
Actually,
see,
a lot of the classics are in graphic novel form.
They are.
Are they really?
Yes.
Mhm.
Okay, because
And
I
so
read
this
I
whole-
read Origin of Species. I read that book cover to cover.
Oh, you'll like the picture version much
Well,
better.
I'd like it. I'd like that better, Jane.
But you know, so there's that controversy that this is really it's like saying, oh, okay, all the books in print are going to go over here. Oh,
Yeah.
what good is that?
Yeah.
So
Right.
the graphic novel is a discussion point in libraries, and it's convenient. People will come in and ask for them, so you can say, oh, like they're over there. But
Yeah.
you know, how is it different from a picture book for kids?
Mhm.
You know, it's in that sense. So it's
Right.
things get
I
across
did Google it.
illustration.
Marcia's got it.
I Googled it, and it said graphic novels are longer. They're a complete narrative, where comic books are usually excerpts of a serialized novel.
Okay.
There you go, Jane.
Mm-hmm.
And they say graphic novels delve deeper into the story and the characters. They're not just
So
action.
novel versus novella,
Right.
graphic
Yeah.
novel versus comic.
Yeah.
That's a good comparison.
Mm.
Janet, you've been
So something that I will commit to do, I have purchased them, but I have not read them. I know an entire series on, I want to say American history that's in graphic novel form, because we bought a couple of them for our 11-year-old grandson for Christmas. He's really a history buff. I think one of the advantages is he's much more likely to read those cover to cover and glean a lot of information than going and picking out some heavy tome on Thomas Jefferson.
Yep.
Which frankly, he's just not going to do, especially at age 11. Now, this really makes me want to borrow them from Tom and read them. They're very visually appealing, but I could see they're chock full of information. You know, they're very thorough.
Yeah, I've been reading the Nathan Hale ones with my youngest, and yeah, there's stuff. I mean, we studied Revolutionary War in school, but when you see the actual battlefields drawn out, you realize how strategy works too. And I mean, it's interesting being a visual person, you get more of the story that way too. So
Sure.
Well, my son and I have tackled the First Testament in graphic form. Or the Old Testament, I should say. So that was interesting.
Wow.
So is it any better?
let me know if Exodus goes good, because I mean, all of it, you
That's
know.
one of the problems is there's some condensing that happens that just doesn't work.
Interesting.
So we should wrap this up, but anybody have any just comments they really have to get out about that we haven't touched on about this book?
Thank you for choosing it.
Yeah.
I
Thank
think
you.
that-
Yeah, Tracy, that was a good choice. Much better than Martin Luther.
Well, it did seem like this would be kind of a good, for those that haven't read the graphic format, a good kind of introduction without.
Yeah.
It was.
Very good.
Yeah, I really, thank you very much.
Right. Good.
Well, I'm glad you read it. I'm glad you all came, and I think we enjoyed it mostly, right?
Yeah, I did. It was good. Thumbs up.
Yeah.
Good.
Thumbs up.
Now put it on your list to talk to your kids or family members.
I really. Yeah.
Start making your list, cleaning out your pencil drawers.
Exactly. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
So,
Thank you.
thank you
night.
all for coming.
Okay.
I'm gonna
Okay.
go and
Good talk.
throw out, I'm gonna
Thanks very
throw out
much.
all my twist ties tonight.
Yes. Keep like 3. That's all you need.
You
Just
always
3.
have to keep some though. You never know when you need some.
That's right.
Thank you.
Let's get more
Bye.
at the grocery
Guys,
store.
good night.